The edge of her bed sagged as someone jumped up next to her and gave a bounce. Gini, who had lain awake a ridiculously long time, groaned and pried open heavy lids to gaze blearily at. She closed her eyes and looked again. Definitely a kid, but not one of the ones she'd brought here. This one looked to be 8 or 9. Red pigtails stuck out from her head at right angles. Freckles marched across a small nose and plump cheeks. Her thin body was buried in an oversized pajama top. "How many days until Christmas?" The kid gave a wriggle of excitement. Gini rubbed her face, blinked a couple of times. It was too early for math. She thought about asking who she was, but there was something about her that was familiar, like Gini should know. If she'd arrived this morning, only why pajamas? It hurt to think that hard, so she stopped and tried out her math skills. 2, no 3 nights. That's how they'd counted when they were little. Not days. Days were endless. Nights, except for Christmas Eve, passed in a blink. Her voice sounded odd, and she coughed to clear it. She eyed her water bottle, but it seemed further away than it had been last night. "We should have an advent calendar with chocolate." Gini managed a nod. "We always had one when we were little." It was way too early for talking, but this kid hadn't gotten the memo. She tipped her head and studied Gini in an unkid-like way. "You're little again, but not little enough." It was also too early for cryptic. "No," she agreed. It was easier. Her lids started to drift down again, but the kid held out a skinny arm and flexed it. She smiled beatifically. "It doesn't hurt anymore." Gini frowned. "Have you been sick?" Her voice still sounded off, so she coughed again, eyed the water bottle, but it would require more energy than currently available to get to it. The look she got was odd. A bit like the look her mom gave her when she thought Gini was being dense. "I got old, but I went young last night." A frown creased the small brow. "I didn't really believe it could happen." Probably because it couldn't. But Gini could remember being the kid who believed in everything, and everyone. She mumbled something that could be taken as agreement, but denied later. "I like young better." The frown faded to thoughtful. "How old are you?" "I'm 35. This groan was internal. Why did 35 bother her more than 34? The mite shook her head. "No, you're not, silly." She bit her lip and studied her. "You're old, but not that old. I'll bet you're like 11 or something." She said that like 11 was in the range of ancient. Gini could sort of remember thinking 11 was old. She rubbed her face again. Was she dreaming? She could be, she supposed. She'd tossed and turned for a long time. She frowned as an awareness of something wrong pressed against the not enough sleep haze. The room seemed bigger. Everything seemed further away, but it wasn't just that. She looked toward the foot of the bed and realized that her feet, well, they weren't far enough down the bed. Either the bed had grown or... She lifted a hand to rub her eyes again and stopped. Turned the hand palm up, then studied the back. Had to be dreaming. Because it looked like her hand had shrunk. Just because she felt awake. Well, trending that direction didn't mean she was. She rubbed a thumb across the back of one hand. Had to be a dream. Her skin hadn't been that soft for years. "This is one weird dream," she said out loud, realizing now what was wrong with her voice. It had shrunk too. She held up her hand again as if she'd find an answer, or wake up. Either would do. The kid put her palm against Gini's, as if that had been an invitation to compare. "I wonder why it made me smaller than you." Gini blinked as she realized wow, talk about a Freudian dream. A shrink would have a field day with this one. "Mom?" "You'd better call me DC, now that the magic made you older," she said chattily. "Sure." She struggled to sitting position and assessed what the magic had done to her. Based on what she could see and couldn't see, she was around 12 or No, she was not 13 in her own dream. She peeked down the too large nightgown neck. Man, it took her years to get her boobs big enough to fill a bra, and poof. Gone. Good thing this was a dream, or she'd be so, she frowned. Usually, when she realized she was dreaming, it would fade, even when she didn't want it to. Not that she wanted to stay in this dream, which it had to be because it wasn't as if she and her mom could go to sleep and wake up young. That was just crazy. This is kind of weird, Desi. I made a wish? On a star? Desi frowned. That would be silly. I was trying to explain Christmas to the green men, and I told them that Christmas is for children, and I wished I was young again, and they made it so, just like I was Captain Picard. She frowned. Or they were. Oh yeah, dreaming. The door to her room banged open, and Dex, a 13-year-old Dex, burst in, his eyes wide and shocked, an oversized robe engulfing a much leaner frame. Desi bounced on the edge of the bed, clapping her hands. You opened your present, too. What the? His gaze landed on the child mom, and he choked back the rude word. It was the green men, Gini supplied helpfully, kind of enjoying the dream now that she was sure it was one, even if it was kind of a nightmare to be 13 again. Desi wished it, and they made the magic happen. The green men. Dex's voice did that crack thing that adolescent boys did when they were going through puberty. Gini chuckled. A pity this was a dream because it was kind of fun seeing Dex rocked off balance. Your voice is changing again. Wow, what would Freud make of that? Was it the thing? But what had made her send them both back to 13? Oh my heck, it was around 13 that she went from buddies to crushing on Dex. It had taken him longer to catch up with her, partly because he was male and partly because she didn't get her growth spurt until she was almost 13. Even though they were the same age, he'd shot past her. With the end result, he looked at her like she was a little sister. She rolled her eyes at that memory, then frowned. Was this some weird version of a Christmas Carol dream? So she could get over him and move on? Or try to work him back under the mistletoe? Why did dreams have to be so mysterious? She glanced at her mom. And just plain weird? Dex blinked, gave his head a shake. There was a look in his eyes that was more sheriff than 13-year-old. Her brain was really messing with her, head. Because this was all in her head. Even though it didn't feel that way, it had to be. You seem to be taking this pretty casually. He managed a whole sentence without losing control of his voice, but she saw the effort it took and grinned wider. Why not enjoy my own dream? You're not dreaming? Desi nodded agreement. This is better than a dream. I hope Santa doesn't change us back when he comes. Maybe the green men will talk to him, Gini said. Could you just for a moment consider the possibility that you're not dreaming? Dex asked. Gini looked at him. I should consider the possibility that green men turned us young. Sure, why not? I didn't say... He crossed his arms over his chest. Okay, if this is dream, wake up. Gini felt a 13-year-old's pout form on her mouth. She crossed her arms. Maybe I don't want to wake up. Maybe you can't, because this isn't a dream. It has to be a dream. I am not doing 13 again. I barely survived the first time. She said it half joking, but there was this weird feeling creeping over her. Because he was right. This dream wasn't fading away like it should. She pushed back the covers, slid off the bed, stood up, and her pajama bottoms fell down. Luckily, her top covered her to her knees, though it barely hung on to narrow shoulders and the now boobless front. She looked around, startled anew by how much bigger the room felt. The log ceiling was further away, and the furniture had grown. Snow had piled up on the window ledge outside, but the light coming in from the uncovered window's top half was still tinged with gray as the storm brooded outside, probably gathering its whatever for round 2. It gave enough light for her to see and feel the wrongness of it all. And yet, part of her remembered being this size in this place. With a huff, she stalked to the mirror. She might have left 13 behind, but Gini would never forget the sight of it. It was the year she felt the worst, looked the worst, was the most awkward person in the whole world, even a world that contained her equally awkward twin. Just like she remembered it. Bony with lots of angles in the places she didn't want them, plump in the places she could have done without, and nothing up front where it would have helped her self-image. Everything. But everything was either too big or too small or just not right.